How do you cultivate literary taste? Most of us do this process unconsciously. We read novels, decide how much we like them, and slot them away as something we like or don't. But can you consciously and accurately explain what you like about your favorite genre? If you're anything like me, you probably can't. And this week, I'm aiming to change that. You see, looking through all the books I've read, I've realized that I've only read a small fraction of fantasy authors. And that if I want to dial in my own preferences, I need to explore all the genre has to offer and read outside of what I'm used to. So I curated a list of fantasy books from YA fantasy romance to traditional high fantasy, and decided to read one of these each day of the week to expose myself to a wider variety of epic fantasy, better understand my own taste, and uncover inspiration for my next series. What's going on, everybody? It is 5 a.m. right now, and I am just about ready to start reading the first book of this challenge, Inda by Sherwood Smith. This book is 576 pages long, so we're already getting started off with a pretty long one. Apparently, it should take me around 10 hours to complete, so let's just get started because we have a long way to go. The main story is about this kid, son of a prince, Inda. He's living his normal life at home, and then he's told he's going to have to go off to be trained at the King's Academy. And it's kind of irregular because he's the third child. So things are kind of looking a little tough already here. It is already 8 o'clock, so it's been about 3 hours, and I've only managed to read 16% of this book. It's looking like it's going to be a long time. I have run into a bit of a problem because my Kindle is still saying that I have 12 hours left to finish this book. However, it's already 9 o'clock. I have been reading for 4 hours, and I've been reading at a pretty rapid pace, about as rapidly as I can read while still comprehending the story. It's not very enjoyable. And that is where I'm kind of meeting an obstacle here. The point of the video is me learning more about the epic fantasy genre, and I'm not sure how well I can do that while reading as fast as I can. It doesn't really make sense. So I'm thinking that what might be better is to just read as far as I can get in the next, 6 hours or so, and just read at a normal pace and try to learn as much as I can. I just finished my reading for the day. Unfortunately, I did not finish all of the entire book. Now, as far as the challenge is concerned, and the fact that I'm ending this first day without even finishing the first book, I don't like doing that, honestly. If I thought it were possible for me to finish this book and actually get some lessons out of it, then I would have continued at my breakneck speed, but I wasn't getting much out of it, and I had been reading at this very fast, not very enjoyable speed. I am going to adjust because I do not want to miss another book. So I've decided that I'm not going to read any more Kindle books throughout this challenge because it's unpredictable, since I don't know how long it will take to read them beforehand. So originally I was planning on reading this other book by the same author, Raymond E. Weiss, but unfortunately this book was also only available on Kindle, and because of my experience today, I decided that's not a good idea. So I found this book instead, which is part of a series that I have definitely heard of, the Rift War Saga. So I decided that I'm going to be switching to reading this first book in the Rift War Saga rather than the other book, Daughter of the Empire. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this challenge. Now that I know the amount of time that every single book is going to take to read, I am going to be able to finish these books for the remaining 6 days. So it is 12:20 something. I woke up in the middle of the night and I don't quite feel tired yet. So I realized it is already the next day. So what better to do than start my new book? So I'm going to start here by reading the next book on my list, The Traitor Baru Cormorant. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, so let's just get started with some reading. So I just finished chapter 1. I am starting to feel a little more tired again, so I think I'm probably going to fall back asleep. I will see you when it's actually real daytime. So it is around 2:40. I'm just going to start reading and do my best, because it does not look like I'm going to get any more sleep tonight anyway, so I might as well get started on this book. First of all, this book is about a girl named Baru Cormorant who grew up in this nation that was a little bit less technologically advanced than some of the others, perhaps. This large empire came in and foisted a bunch of colonial treaties and whatnot onto this nation to incorporate it as part of their empire. This one feels so much more exciting to me. It seems like it's going to be exploring the ideas of revolution versus trying to find power within the system. And that is what Baru's quest is. She's aiming to become powerful enough within the system to influence things. There's a lot she doesn't understand about the empire and the way that it's run, and she's just trying to figure out her way. So that's kind of like a mystery element. I'm gonna keep listening, observe as much as I can, see what we can learn. So that did not go in the way that I expected. I'm not going to give any details because I don't want it to be spoilery, but the story does definitely go for that political thriller kind of vibe, where things are changing, where there's twists and turns. It's that blended with like a fantasy world. The story is mainly political intrigue, so I think that it's actually really good for lessons in that. So I'm back for day 3 and book 3, which is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Check it. I looked up the pronunciation. That's how you were supposed to pronounce it. So that's what I learned today. Hopefully that's not all I learned today. So let's just get started and let's see how this book goes. So far, Red Queen seems to be this dystopian sort of story where there's 2 different classes of people, one with magical powers and one without any powers. And the normal ones basically live in these terrible situations. It's hard for them to get a job. If they don't have a job, then they're going to eventually be sent to fight in a war. The main character, Mare's situation just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then somebody mysteriously shows up at her door telling her that there has been a royal summons for her. This is an interesting book so far. I definitely can see why people have enjoyed it so much. So I just finished reading The Red Queen. This was actually a really interesting book. It was a very easy read for me, unlike the previous 2 that were a little bit more difficult to get through. This one, I just enjoyed reading it the whole time, so that was a good thing. I would probably only give it like a 4.5 though, because there were a few things that I didn't really like. First of all, our protagonist, toward the end of the book, she does something that just seems kind of stupid. It obviously backfires on her, but the fact that she thought it was a good idea in the first place makes you kind of like her less. There's other things throughout the book that are similar to that, like explanations or things that she says that feel like they're somewhat plausible, but like she's kind of getting off too easily. Like she's got some plot armor, basically. The story overall was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It was cool not really knowing who to trust among the different people that were in her life, feeling like all these people could betray her at some point. Another good book to add to my list here, and I think that I'm starting to see more of the similarities as I look at each one of these books. When I was just reading the first 1 or 2, you don't really notice that much in common, but as I get more and more books throughout this week, I think I'm going to notice more and more that is in common between these books, and things to learn about the epic fantasy genre and just fantasy in general from them. I'm back for day 4 with book 4, a replacement for The Daughter of the Empire, Magician Apprentice. I'm excited for this book actually because I had heard of the Riftforce saga before this time, but I never really got a chance to try and read it. Apparently this is a pretty big fantasy series and it's supposed to be really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this book holds in store. Magician Apprentice seems to be a book about this boy who wanted to be like a swordsman, and during the annual ceremony where all the people who come of age take on their professions, he was not chosen by any of the major professions, but due to a chance meeting with a magician who discovered some of his talent, they decided to choose him as an apprentice. This book does feel very old school, sort of fantasy, kind of inspired by Tolkien. So I just finished this entire book. The story was epic fantasy through and through. However, it lacked some of the modern storytelling. The world was pretty interesting, but I didn't much care for the characters besides one. And that's actually one of the big problems that I found with the book, is that in the beginning it starts off from this one character's perspective, and it's just him over and over and over and over again, and you get accustomed to being in this character's head, and then suddenly it's just opening up into tons of different characters' perspectives before you really had the chance to care about any of them. It makes it boring to listen to those chapters. And then toward the end of the book, the character that I like, who you're used to listening to, is just absent, and that made it really difficult for me to focus toward the end. Like, I literally had to sit up. I had to sit up because if I was laying down, there was a danger I was going to fall asleep. But luckily, as far as this challenge, this is the last older epic fantasy novel. Okay, day 5 and book 5, Furies of Calderon. And despite the fact that none of the last 4 books have been a 5 for me, I'm very excited to start this book today for 2 major reasons. First of all, it's my first book I've ever read by Jim Butcher, and the second reason I'm interested in this book is because it actually has a really interesting backstory. Basically, Jim Butcher wanted to prove that there was no such thing as bad ideas, only bad execution. So he accepted 2 random ideas as the foundation for this story. The first was Lost Roman Legion, and the second was Pokemon. So I'm curious to see how he was able to create a story out of that. Let's just get into this with the first session of reading. There's a few characters we've been exposed to so far, but there's different kinds of things that are going on. One character, Amara, is kind of tangled in this political struggle where there's a group trying to kill the current leader of their country. The other 2 characters so far are more engrossed in this local dispute where there's this noble who's trying to get his son out of this rape conviction. In the morning, I was feeling a little bit sleepy, so I decided to take some notes to make sure I was paying attention to all the important aspects for each chapter. This is so much fun. Oh god. I'm really enjoying this book right now, honestly. That was good. Yes, finally. That was so good. Oh my god. The 5th day, the first 4 books. I liked some. I might have even really liked some, but I didn't love any. Now, this book right here, I loved this book. That was awesome. The magic system with the Pokemon is freaking cool. I never would have thought Pokemon magic system would be that cool. And this one is interesting because it's a little softer than one that Brandon Sanderson creates. But within that softness, there is a little bit more mystery. The morality is not completely black and white. There's some gray in there as well. But mostly the characters are acting for good intentions. It's firmly the type of story that I like to see. If I can get some more stuff like this, I'll be a very happy camper. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow for book 6 and hopefully another banger, Black Prism. And I'm very excited to read this one because of how cool I heard the magic system is related to colors and whatnot. I'm not entirely sure yet, but it sounds really cool. However, this book is really long. It's like 645 pages, so it's going to take the better part of the full day to complete. But if it's as good as Furies of Calderon was yesterday, then I don't really mind that much. So far the story is about 2 main characters. One, this guy named Gavin, who is the most powerful magic user in their entire kingdom, world, whatever it is. And another person named Kip, who is potentially related to Gavin. After Kip finds out that his town is going to be burned down, he tries to run away with his friends. Gavin's story is more of a political story where he's the head of one of the branches of the government and he has to work alongside and potentially against the other people in it. I just finished Black Prism, and that was a really cool book. The magic system in that is probably one of my favorites. The rules of it are amazing, the whole structure of it, the morality built around it, the world that functions around it. And this also made me realize one other thing that I really like in fantasy novels, and that's mysterious history. Maybe not just history, but like mysterious elements of the world. In this novel, the story between the two brothers, the kind of backstory about what happened in the war and what happened with them is all really mysterious, and every little detail that you get is just so amazing. That is an element of fantasy stories that I really enjoy, and this book does that so well. Another thing I think Brent Weeks does really well in this is that somehow, even though some of the characters have taken some actions that are not exactly great, you still like them all anyway. Every single perspective character I ended up liking, and despite the fact that both brothers are working against each other's aims, I found myself rooting for both of them. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic that he was able to create there with characters. Anyway, I've been reading for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and I'm tired. So I'm gonna call it here, and I will see you tomorrow for the last book, and one that I've been looking forward to for months now, The Lies of Locke Lamora. This is the longest book for the entire challenge, so this is going to take pretty much the whole day, but it's supposed to be a really good book. So I'm excited to begin and see where this takes me. Okay, so far we have this character, Locke, and he's basically like this person who's very inclined to thieving and crime and that sort of thing. And we start off with a prologue where he's a kid, and then the book itself starts when he's an adult, and he's planning this like big job where they're trying to steal half of this Don's money. So I reached the 60% mark, and I'm enjoying this book as well. This is very different in feel from the last two. It's not as epic fantasy. It feels a little like a thriller. Not the same pace as a thriller, but there's lots of mystery and twists and turns and that sort of thing. That was really good. So I just finished The Lies of Locke Lamora, and that was a really fun book, honestly. This was not traditionally what I would like to write necessarily. Still, there were some good things to learn from it. I love how the mystery was weaved through this entire story, leaving you always guessing what's going on and like who's who, how things work. The magic was actually pretty cool too, although this magic is much darker and it's very powerful and mysterious. Anyway, this book was super enjoyable, and I'm really happy to have read it. These last 3 books that I finished here toward the end of this challenge were worth the entire challenge themselves. I'm just happy to have read them. Next, I want to take some time to talk about what I learned from this experience and share some of these lessons with you. Hopefully, you can learn something from my lessons as well. But before I do that, I do need some time to think through these, because I just spent the last 7 days reading almost all day, every day. So I thought about it for a while here, and now I've come up with the lessons that I learned from this entire experience. And I split this up into things that I want to do in my next book and things that I want to avoid doing. So first, I'm just going to go through things to avoid. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to dwell on the negative stuff. Anything resembling older fantasy. With some of the books that I read, it felt a little bit cliched, keeping readers away from any one regular POV character for too long. In Magician Apprentice, we basically lose contact with Pug for a large percentage of the story. He's the protagonist and the only character I really cared about, and he just was gone, and then the story wasn't as interesting to me. And then lastly, letting characters off too easily. This was something that I noticed in Red Queen. I really liked that book, but I felt like the protagonist was getting off too easily. Like, characters should have been more suspicious of her than they were sometimes, and I definitely do not want to let my characters off like that. I don't want the reader to feel like the character is just getting lucky because they're the protagonist. So now with all that stuff out of the way, let's talk about what I want to include based on what I learned through this reading. The first and most important thing that I learned was including mystery in the stories. And this was something that I really loved, especially about Black Prism. The mystery about the relationship between the two brothers, what happened with them in the past in the War of the Prisms, and how society proceeded forward from there. All of that sort of stuff was really intriguing for me and really drew me into the book and created this sense of wonder. And it made me think about some of the other series that I really enjoyed, like A Song of Ice and Fire, where there's this mysterious history of the world. And this also showed up in the Stormlight Archive with the visions that Dalinar is having and the mystery of what they mean. These mysterious elements really make the world much more interesting for me, and they make it this place of wonder and uncertainty, and they make it feel like somewhere different than you've ever been before. So that's something I definitely want to include in my next book. Now, the next thing that I want to include is wondrous magic. And specifically what I mean is magic that makes you think about how you would use it if you were the character in that situation. Because I noticed myself doing that with a few of the magic systems. The one from Red Queen, where it was this cool genetic magic system where each person has a different inborn ability. The one from Furies of Calderon, where you have these cool elemental magics that are very flexible and that you can use in all these different ways. And especially the one from Black Prism, where it's this super flexible magic based on different colors and the abilities you get with being able to manipulate these colors. And all of these types of magic really made me think about how they could be used to aid the characters. And I think that really draws you into the story as well. So I would love to create a magic system like that. And I've been thinking about it recently, and I'm going to be spending some time more specifically working on the magic system for my next story. So more on that in a little bit. And the last thing that I really liked in these stories was what I'm going to call a light gray protagonist. And the reason why I want to say light gray is because I want to draw a distinction between like a typical morally gray character and what I'm talking about. When I think of morally gray, I think of somebody more like a character from an Abercrombie book where they're kind of evil. They're not really that likable, but they also have some sort of understandable aspects to them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who's like, on the whole, they're a lot better than they are bad. They do have their own moral failings, and it makes them more believable. And really, Black Prism made me think about this, specifically with the character of the Prism, because he's done some bad stuff in the past, but we don't necessarily understand all the reasons why he's done that, and mostly it seems like he's had good reasons for doing what he's done. And more importantly, he's trying to do right in the present. He's not exactly perfect, he's not the best at all times, but he's trying to be better, and he's trying to improve himself. These are the types of characters that I would like to populate my stories with. So there's no good or evil, black and white sort of thing, but there's also not these characters that are just despicable, but somehow you're supposed to still like them. Those are the main things that I took away from this reading experience and that I would like to include in my next novel. So I read 7-ish epic fantasy novels in the last 7 days for a total of more than 3,000 pages and more than 1 million words. It was tough going so far outside of my comfort zone with some of these picks, and I didn't enjoy every book I read, but I was able to find some common elements that I enjoy in epic fantasy and get a better idea of what I want to include in my next series. Oh, and one flaw of my current storytelling that these books pointed out to me was my ability to use political intrigue. Honestly, I kind of suck at writing political intrigue right now, so I'm going to make a video studying the political intrigue in some of these books, as well as some of my favorites for political intrigue, The Clash of Clans and The Way of Kings. So look out for that video in just a few weeks.